Peter Maddox, thank you very much for taking this time to join us in this Facebook group for an interview. And it's a very timely interview. Never really knew what was going to happen here the last couple of days. But first of all, Peter, maybe just introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about DSA as far as an association, in Canada, but it's a global thing as well. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. So my name's Peter Maddox, president of the Direct Sellers Association of Canada, but with a slight Australian accent that you might pick up, but been here quite a while. So yeah, basically DSA is an industry association, the member companies in the direct selling space. So it's not the independent sales consultant, it's the larger companies. We have about 40 member companies in there. Some of those are Canadian, most are US companies who do some business in Canada. And then we have a handful from Europe and Asia as well. And there are DSAs sort of independent, but related in 65 countries around the world. So all the countries where there's kind of a bit of an evolved direct selling industry. There are some countries where it's not so evolved and it's still a little bit of the Wild West. And typically DSAs advocate for their members. They try to make sure that there's, appropriate regulation, but from government, but there's also an incentive for people to get into entrepreneurial type work. And we try to promote the industry and get our members together for networking and, to share best practice and those sorts of things. And obviously we like to talk to people like you who are somewhat friends of the industry and, understand it and, are interested in what it is and how it's evolved.
Cool. Yeah, I'm a big fan of it. I've been involved in it for over 20 years. So, Peter, tell us a little bit about the Code of Ethics. Like, as an association, again, you're 40 member companies, but how many companies are operating in? Let's use Canada as the example. How many direct selling companies are operating in Canada? And tell us a little bit about those Code of Ethics, because probably some of them are on the fringes of that, right?
Yeah. So it's hard to get an exact number for how many companies are operating here, because a lot of them, the nature of direct selling is there are a lot of companies in the US and someone in Minnesota has a friend in Manitoba and all of a sudden they're selling them products and they're interested. So it kind of can spread in unusual ways outside the control of the business. But I would suspect there's probably officially licensed and operating in Canada, there's somewhere towards 100 companies, direct selling companies in Canada, and probably as many again who are selling some products. There's a sort of a loophole in Canadian law called not for resale, where companies can ship products to consumers in Canada, products that aren't necessarily approved by Health Canada or whatever regulator. So yeah, it changes. Direct selling companies come and go fairly quickly. They can grow very quickly. They can also, reach a peak, whether it's a trend in a product that goes away, or sometimes their compensation plan meant that the consultants were making money, but the company ended up not making any money. Those sorts of things. And so for those companies who are in Canada, they have an opportunity to join us. It's not like most associations where you pay money and all of a sudden you're a member. They have to send to us all their marketing materials and compensation plans. And, we do a background check on them and the individuals running the company just to make sure that they're at a minimum meeting the laws of Canada. But then we have our own code of ethics that goes a little bit above the laws in terms of, some of the way that the independent consultants and the customers are treated and return policies and those sorts of things. So the companies that are our members are the best of the best in terms of how they meet the regulations and how they behave ethically. Not to say some of the others don't do a good job as well, but some of the others are also ones that maybe don't want to draw attention to those sorts of things.
Have you ever turned companies away?
We've turned companies away. We've actually kicked at least one company out of membership as well, just because of the nature of what they were doing. So it's not sort of a toothless tiger. It does have some teeth. One of the realities for this industry is even if a non-member company does the wrong thing, everybody kind of gets tarred with the same brush. So at the same time as we're really working with our member companies, we do try to educate the population and the companies more broadly to why it's important that people do business ethically. So that's where we stand.
So you mentioned something in there on the NFR. Do you find that the NFR falls a lot in, let's call it the supplement, the health products? And if yes or no, is a lot of it because of the stringent requirements to get stuff approved by Health Canada?
Absolutely. I mean, I would suspect the majority of it is the health supplements, because it's kind of, like I said, it's a little bit of a loophole that you can. So in the US, to launch a healthcare product, you don't need to get approval by the regulator necessarily. You just need to put it out there, make some claims, and hope that you don't get in trouble and get sued by the FTC or, sorry, the FDA, or whoever's regulating it. The US is a little bit different. Sorry, Canada is a little bit different, whereby all products need to be pre-approved. Any health claims you're making need to be backed up by science. So some companies don't want to jump through those hoops. So there's an option that consumers can order up to 3 months personal use of products and have them shipped to them, and they don't have to be approved by Health Canada. We talk to a lot of companies in the US. We discourage this. We tell them, that it's not, you might make a little bit of money in Canada, but if you come in, get licensed, do everything right, that's a really great opportunity. That it's a big market. To some degree, it's underserved for direct selling compared to the US and some other markets. So the average company and the average consultant makes more in Canada than they do in the US, just because there's less companies selling to the amount of companies that we have. So yeah, we try to sell. The real opportunity is getting in here, committing to the Canadian market, setting up a warehouse or an office, having some staff on the ground, showing the consultants that you really love Canada and want to stay here, and that's where the growth is.
Yeah, and in the supplement, each product needs a like what is it, an NPN number?
Depending on the products, depending if it's a over-the-counter drug or it's a natural health product, there's various different. I can't claim to be a complete expert on that stuff, and for better or worse, Canada, it can be. There are other countries that require products to be licensed, but Canada tends to be on the slower side in terms of getting the products approved. Yeah. And if a company wants to launch a product in multiple countries at once, that can be a bit of a problem. Plus with COVID and, the whole CBD file, that's really taken a lot of workload for Health Canada. And they're probably even slower right now than they have been in the past. So fingers crossed that it turns around.
Yeah. So basically the NFR thing would be just sort of that backdoor way to kind of keep product flowing into the country.
But under NFR, there should be no consultants here selling product and but once again,
nobody's following them around.
There's not a lot of policing, and that's fine until someone has a bad reaction to a product, and then so we really would suggest that it's not the best idea in the world.
Okay, cool. So I want to jump into the CBC News article that you were quoted on a couple of days ago. And it's interesting because when we chatted here on Zoom, I don't know how many weeks ago now, we kind of dove into this conversation because, I get excited when we kind of figure out what that fine line is and educate people. And that's what I wanted to do with this interview that we had scheduled for today. But, it was interesting. So the first question I want to ask you is if you can share with us sort of the difference. These are, I guess, loosely terms, but there's direct sales, multi-level marketing, network marketing, MLM. Like, what is all that? Like, from your perspective, are they one and the same? Are they just different the way things are done?
I mean, the only one out of those that I think has a legal definition is multi-level marketing, or MLM. And I can touch on that in a minute, but I'll start at the bottom. So direct selling is very much an all-encompassing term. And once again, where the edges of direct selling finish is sort of up to debate, depending on who you talk to. Historically, direct selling was people going door to door selling products. It was men selling vacuums and pots and pans and the Fuller Brush Company, encyclopedias. It was women selling makeup and cleaning products and those sorts of things as well. That really doesn't exist anymore, largely because in a lot of Canadian provinces now, door-to-door sales isn't legal, or it's very stringently controlled. So beyond that, it sort of has evolved into things like still direct selling, things like home parties where people will go to home parties and sell products. That still goes on, although under COVID, it's not obviously been knocked on the head, which has evolved into things like Facebook Live, where people can demonstrate to a whole bunch of people on Facebook Live. Direct selling really works with products that require some sort of demonstration and explanation, which is why cosmetics and kitchenware and those sorts of things have been so popular. Now, MLM is a specific type of direct selling where not only are you selling products, but there's an opportunity to, I guess, build your own sales team and train that sales team and make them successful. And if they are, and they sell products, then the person who recruited them can make a little bit of commission on that. So it's in their best interest to make sure people they've recruited understand the products and get the training and all those sorts of things. Now, where that starts to become a little bit of an issue is there can be a little bit of a, I guess, people can start to focus more on the recruiting than on selling the products. And that in the past has created issues for the direct selling industry. Because if you're paying people to recruit people and the product is secondary, and the only goal is to funnel money up to people higher up the chain, and that is what starts to become a pyramid scheme. And in Canada, multi-level marketing and pyramid schemes are defined by the Competition Act. The Competition Bureau is the authority that regulates that and polices that. And every company that comes to Canada and gets licensed and operates across the provinces needs to go to the Competition Bureau and have their compensation plan checked to make sure that it is a multi-level marketing plan, that it doesn't start to stray into being a pyramid scheme, which is obviously what we get hit with a lot. Oh, you're just a pyramid scheme. Well, no, that's a long way from the truth. Pyramid schemes are illegal, and our members and the industry more widely is, committed to selling products and to helping people make money.
So you could have a legitimate MLM company, but they're acting like a pyramid scheme. So you know what I mean? Like, because they're just recruiting.
Yeah, and at that point, they are no longer a legitimate multi-level marketing company. They're a pyramid scheme. So, and there are some we're going to get into this, I think. So there are some red flags to look for.
Absolutely.
Particularly as a consumer or someone who's considering becoming a salesperson or a consultant for a company. So if the company really focuses on, by recruiting people, you will earn this money, then that's a red flag. Number one should always be the product. You can sell this product, you can sell it to people. Those people might be interested in selling it themselves and you can play a part in that. That's fine. But if they say, hey, if you recruit 3 people, we're going to pay you $500, then that's 100% a no-no. That has to be based on, if you recruit 3 people and each of those sells $1,000 worth of product, we'll give you $500, then that's starting to get a little bit more towards, what the Competition Bureau and what we as an association look for. And once again, it's because the US is under different, they don't pre-approve companies like that. You can start a direct selling company today, hit the market tomorrow, and it's more, the US is more regulated by complaint than proactively regulated ahead of the startup of a company. So that's sometimes where Canadians in the US, they see things that happen in the US and ascribe those same characteristics to companies in Canada, which is not the truth, because we have the Competition Bureau, we have the provincial consumer affairs branches that license direct selling companies, and in some provinces they license individual salespeople. We have better business bureaus, we have the DSA. Like, it's not easy to do the wrong thing in Canada and not have somebody know about it.
That's interesting. All right, cool. So another comment that was made in the CBC News article, this is cool that I get to ask you the follow-up.
Yeah.
Right. So CBC News puts this piece out there and then I get to ask you the follow-up question. So one of the comments that was made, or one of the statements, it can be difficult to make money as a direct seller, and it's possible to even lose money if someone buys too much inventory they can't sell. So I have a 3-part question here for you is, why is it difficult to make money? Is this true? What about the inventory? What's it a reasonable amount of inventory? So if somebody were going to join a company, what's a reasonable investment? And as an ongoing business, again, we're home-based business, right? What is a reasonable amount of inventory to run a home-based business? And my 3rd part of that question is, hasn't things changed a little bit with technology and shipping? Like, the Amazon model, like companies are just, they can get to the consumer from a warehouse much easier than requiring their sales reps to, manage all this inventory and run around town and make deliveries and stuff. So maybe you can just kind of speak to those.
Yeah, I mean, number one, it is difficult to make money in general in life. What are they, 90% of small businesses go out of business within 2 years or something like, I don't know the exact figure, but that's a bit of a guesstimate of what it is. So no one signs up for a direct selling company and, the money starts rolling in. It takes hard work. It takes the skill set. It takes building that skill set, and it takes commitment and time to get it done. So that's definitely number one. But for those who do it right, so when you're signing up for a direct selling company, you're basically signing up like a mini franchise. They give you a product, they give you some tools to sell, like your own website. They give you some training and some product information, and from there, it's up to you. Do you run with it or not? Do you make a success of it or not? The company will continue to try and help you, but a lot of people sign up and then they think, I didn't realize it was going to be hard work. I'm out. And that's fine. That's part of the process.
Or they treat it like a hobby.
They treat it like a hobby, yeah. Or they think that customers will come to them. And that's, if you're lucky enough and you're an influencer and you have, tens of thousands of people following you, maybe that's the case, but it's typically not. So having said that, it is a great opportunity both to make some extra money and to learn some business skills. A lot of people start as direct sellers, but then, take it into what I would call more traditional entrepreneurship, and they do buy a franchise or they do start a business or those sorts of things sort of outside of the direct selling realm. And they say that direct selling was a really good base to learning how to take rejection and learning how to ask people to buy things and, opening up conversations in a networking perspective, those sorts of things. So I think that's the first thing to get on board. So basically, usually when you sign up for a direct selling company, if they sell a physical product, there are some that sell services like phone services and utilities and those sorts of things, but we'll stick with physical products. Typically for $100 or less, you can buy what is called a starter kit. And that will include some sample products and some training materials and those sorts of things. Now, legally in Canada, the value of the products in that starter kit have to be at least equivalent or more than what you're paying. So just by buying that, you're coming out ahead already. You're getting more product than the value that you're paying for. Beyond that, it's obviously up to the consumer or the new consultant how their selling goes. In terms of inventory, more and more, like I would say the majority of companies now don't require the consultant to carry inventory. They ship. You talked about the Amazon model or whatever. The customer has an app. Sorry, the consultant has an app. They go to the customer, what would you like to buy? They put the order in. That order is shipped direct from a warehouse in Toronto or Vancouver or in the US or something and goes directly to the consumer. So there's no need for that consultant to have. The old story from 20 years ago was a garage full of stock that they couldn't get rid of, and that there are still some companies that require people or give the option for people to hold stock, but that's not a necessity anymore. And if that is the case, that they hold their own stock, it's really up to the company as to how many SKUs do they have. If you've got 700 types of lipstick, do you need to have on stock each of those lipsticks, or do you just carry the top sellers for your and then if someone wants something that's a little bit unusual, do you buy that in? So I think the days of people getting loaded down with stock in order to stay in the business is if not at an end, then very, very close to being at an end.
So the comment in the article, and I guess I'm not using the article specifically, but it's sort of a representation of the generic thought process of this home business space. This is a stigma that's sort of carried itself for decades, right? That's still out there, but we're not really sure if there's truth behind it or not, right?
Yeah, and then that's something as an association we go out into the media and try and proactively promote. And social media is the easiest way to do that, but to really hit home, we're starting to try and get into the more mainstream media a little bit and to discuss what is direct selling today, not what is. There was a comment under that story about there's a TV show called On Being a God in Central Florida, which is about someone who was in direct selling in the 90s in Central Florida. It's sort of loosely based on fact, but that was a fictional story. B, it was in the US, a different jurisdiction where different things happen. And C, it was 30 years ago. But people say that, well, that's what's happening in the direct selling industry today, which is 100% not the case. It's, you know, we are trying to proactively show that, to showcase the individuals who are in it and who have been successful, and to tell their true stories, not stories of, you know, I bought in a Hawaiian island, or, you know, I have a Lamborghini or whatever, but, you know, I made a few $100s and I was able to, you know, pay off my car. The income I've made has really been helpful to my family. You know, it's supported my kids going to school, those sorts of things. So that's really it's very much about realism now, and, you know, what is direct selling. And there are a smaller number of people who do make a full-time living and more out of it, but guess what? They work 50, 60, 70 hours a week to do that, and they love it. But, you know, unless you're going to work full-time, you're not going to make anything near a full-time salary out of this.
Yeah, takes a lot of work.
But yeah, 100% that, you know, there's a lot of myths and stigma out there, and it's a big slow ship, and we're slowly turning it around in the right direction.
Yeah, well, you know, and having these conversations,
absolutely,
right, and educating, get the word out. So I'm just checking in here. We've got Elsie Roman watching, Paul O'Donnell. Who else we got here? We got Avril watching. Mary Jane says, good afternoon. She says, I like that, a mini franchise.
Yeah, it's basically what it is, right? It's you're given, the only difference with the franchise is typically you're given a territory and no other franchisee can go into that territory. But, you know, beyond that, they're setting you up. It's in the company's best interest for you to succeed. They provide products that they know are popular because they've been selling them all around the world. They have a system or a selling template that they've been working on for 20, 30 years to perfect. And they want to support you in an ongoing sense. And that's got easier with COVID because everything's by Zoom, training's by Zoom. So I think, yeah, I mean, it really is a business in a box in a way.
It is. And it's not just the company that has a vested interest. It's the person that introduced you and brought you.
Of course.
The sponsor. They you know, they have a financial investment. You know, if you create success, they get some overrides on that, right? So
yeah, absolutely. And that sort of is what builds the business. Is you get some people who start to build a sales network and they sit back and they talk about residual income, and, you know, that can soon, if you don't work your business being the sales but also the consultants that are under you, that can sort of shrink pretty quickly. Yeah,
absolutely. All right, the other point that I picked up in the article was there are about 1.2 million independent sales consultants in Canada, meaning the average seller would have only made 1,000 per year. That's just kind of dividing some numbers, right?
Yeah.
My first question for you is, well, I guess I have a three-part question again. So is everybody getting in, out of these 1.2 million, are they all getting in here to make money?
Right? Absolutely not. Let me answer that one first. Absolutely not. You know, the exact numbers are kind of hard to, and you'd have to go to individual companies to ask how they sort of divide it up. But a very significant number of those people are in three categories. They like the products. They know that if you're registered as a consultant, you get a bigger discount on the product. So they sign up as a seller, but just buy products and use that discount. So that's one. Secondly, people who, I saw this new term the other week, they call them kidnappers. They're people who just go around buying starter kits from different companies they like, because, as I said, you get more value of product in the starter kit than the cost. So, you know, once a year they'll go to a nutritional company and buy their starter kit, and that, you know, try out the new products and stuff like that, or cosmetics or whatever it is. And then you get people who, you know, go, yeah, direct selling, I want to do it, I'm going to build an empire. And then they get the package, and then they realize they've got 3 kids and they've got a full-time job, and, you know, they're doing, and they just don't really start the business. And so that makes up a decent chunk of that number. And beyond that, you have people who even if they're selling things to friends and family, all that really does is they roll that back into discounts on the products that they're already using. So they're not making a profit per se, but they're getting their consumables much cheaper. And then you get people who are making, working at 5 hours a week and making $100-200 here and there. And as I said, you get the ones who are really working the business. They're recruiting, they're selling, they're talking, they're really driving the business, and they can make good part-time up to full-time revenue.
Yeah. Which kind of jumps into my reason for writing the book was, I wanted to kind of get it out there to say, hey, look, and I'm going to first ask you the question is, does Revenue Canada or the IRS see these types of independent sales consultants or distributors as a legitimate business for tax purpose? So if they earned $1,000, is that free money, or do they got to claim that on their taxes?
Good question, and you're probably the better one to answer that. But I don't know if that's a setup question. But yeah, I mean, if you're earning money and it's part of your revenue across, whether we now have the gig economy where people might be driving for Uber, working in a restaurant, teaching piano, selling cosmetics. If that together adds up to an amount, then yeah, absolutely, that's money you're making. But with that, and you'll talk about this, with that comes opportunity as well in terms of, hey, now you've got a home office, now you've got selling expenses and business expenses. So, that can help to bring down that burden pretty significantly.
Absolutely. And if you look at 1.2 million independent sales, if they could grasp that message, and if they had full-time income and made $1,000 on the side, it's maybe we could help them treat it more like a business, because you got to have an intention to make it.
And to be fair, like as an association, we don't lead with become a consultant. You can write off your home office. We say become a consultant, you can make money and you can learn new skills and build your network and become part of a family in a way. But one of the massive advantages is what you're talking about, which is also the ability to write off some of that income.
Yeah, absolutely. So if someone were to consider joining a direct sales company, what do you recommend they use as sort of their evaluation criteria? I know we had a good discussion on that when we talked last on Zoom. I just wanted to share it for the community here, basically from your perspective. And I shared a document that we had created over the years, just to kind of as a template for people to, before they jumped in, because there is a fine line. There's all these pieces that we've talked about, on this call. But from your perspective, what do you recommend? Like, what are those code of ethics check boxes?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, number one, as with anything in life, talk to other people who have maybe worked with that company and what have been their experiences. Did they make money? Did they get support? Did they feel the company was behaving in an ethical manner? So try and find those people. And chances are you have found those people, because they're probably the ones talking to you about the opportunity. But spread it a little bit further and talk to the community. Do a little bit of research. Do you like the product? Doesn't matter what you sell, what business model. It's much easier to sell a product that you love, because you can talk about it with love and about how you've used it personally and how it's changed your life. So that's incredible. Are they a DSA Canada member? Obviously, I have to drop that one in there, because that speaks to the fact that they're an ethical company that treats their consultants and treats their customers well, and they're committed to that. So I think that's very important. Most of our members will have a DSA logo or somewhere at the bottom of their homepage on their website, or you can go to our website, dsa.ca, and go to the members page and see a list of the companies that are members of ours. And I think beyond that, it's just, the beauty of direct selling is you can join the company for $100, $200 and see what it's like. And if at the end of that, you're like, this company's not for me, or direct selling's not for me, you've spent, that's much better than buying a franchise for $100,000 and realizing it's not for you. So you get the chance to buy in at a very low value just to get a sense for the company as well. But you can obviously do research. The problem with doing research about direct selling companies online is there's a lot of shrieky people on social media and Reddit who scream every time anyone mentions a direct selling company, and sometimes they're people who maybe they didn't succeed, so they're very anti-direct selling.
There's lots of news articles out there that aren't saying, hey, go do it.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's that's why we as an association work to
Yeah.
sort of get the true message out there.
Yeah. All right, cool. So, anyways, I want to appreciate the feedback you gave me on the book. So everyone that's in the group that's watching this, I mailed Peter a book. I don't know what it was, in January or something. He reached out to me last month, so we had a good conversation. But in the book, Peter, on the foreword, Darlene Long wrote the foreword. Now, she's a business partner and a friend of mine since 2008. But something I wanted you to just talk about, in 2017, she got the Mark of Distinction Award. Can you just tell us a little bit about what that is, the significance? Because, I think it's significant, and I'm not sure if everybody even knows it exists, right?
Yeah, we think it's significant too. So DSA Canada, we have an awards ceremony every year. And there's a bunch of awards. The majority of them are for people who work with the head office companies. So, for various things they've done for the association and for the industry. But we have a couple of awards for people who work in the independent sales consultant area, and Mark of Distinction is one. And so these awards are for people who have done a really great job, upholding the ethical side of what the DSA does, but also just being a positive force for their company and in their community. Whether that's charity work with their team, or charity work that they do on their own, whether it's just the commitment they make to training the people in their network and really bringing them up to standard, and making successes not just of themselves, but building this sort of team of success across their region. So there are those awards, and every year we give them out, and we were in Newfoundland, I think 3 years ago, for an award, and we had an amazing lady from Mary Kay who won one of our consultant awards, and she was actually able to be there. Just happened that we had our conference, and she was phenomenal. And we tend to talk more to the companies, but to talk to the individual consultants is so empowering, and to see their stories. And it's something we intend to continue doing, and possibly to grow as well, to recognize that. One thing we have done, and we started it last year, we have a thing called Direct Sellers Day now, which is in September. Yeah. It'll be September 15th this year. It's basically a celebration of all the great things that come out of direct selling in Canada. So last year we got a whole lot of consultants to do videos about what direct selling has meant for them, and we got those out, and we did some media around that. So that's another thing we're trying to do to really, if we don't speak about direct selling, there are plenty of other people who'll jump into the vacuum and talk, and they don't always see it in the same positive light that we do. So it's important for us to really to spread, to uphold the positives.
And these awards, I mean, I see the Mark of Distinction. It's like winning a Grammy or an Oscar. So I mean, it's big, right? Like it's pretty
direct selling companies, they love to recognize success. You see if you're at some of these companies and you're a successful salespeople, they'll put you on a ship and take you down to the Caribbean, and they have all these parties, and they give out awards, and they recognize success, and we just want to play a small part in that. And I think it's been really special to the people who won it.
Yeah, that's awesome. Kind of end this up here, but what do you see as the future of the direct selling industry? Like, what are the trends out there? And if somebody was watching this, let's say they're, baking at home, like they're doing something non-direct sales-ish, what trends, like what future would what would you want to say to them to say, hey, look, there might be something over there. Just take a look at, beyond sort of reading an article in CBC or whatever.
Yeah.
That, you know what I mean? Like, just kind of some final thoughts and recommendations.
Yeah, I think in terms of trends, the trend is technology, and that's really being exacerbated by COVID. But a lot of our member companies had a pretty good year last year in terms of sales, just because, for a number of things, people who were doing direct sales probably had a bit more time to work on their business and to build their customer base, particularly for things like health products, cookware, kitchen stuff. They had bumpy years because everybody's cooking, everybody's worried about their health and interested in, taking supplements and those sorts of things. And I think thirdly, people they wanted to support their friends who had small businesses, and this was one way to do that. But really, you know, companies that used to do home parties, it's all online now. Everyone is learning how to use Facebook Live, how to use even TikTok. Not that I know how to use TikTok, but you know, it's out there. So I think that's very important. You know, a lot of companies now, you make a sale, you get paid straight away. It's in your account. You know, the commission stuff might come a little, you know, some of the add-ons might come a little bit later, but if you make 20% commission and you sell someone something for $100, there's $20 in your account. Now that's something that's coming slowly. Some are doing it weekly now, some are still doing it monthly, but that's something that's evolving, because with Uber, you drive someone somewhere, you get that money in your account straight away. So that's something that's driving that. I think the other thing is just the boundary between direct selling, between online marketplaces, between influencer marketing is vague and getting vaguer. Like if someone's on Instagram, they have a lot of followers and they say, hey, go to this link and buy this product, they're getting a cut out of that. So is that direct selling? That's a big question for us. If someone's selling towels and online to their own you know, website, is that direct selling? Or, you know, and do they bring on other people to that? So I think the future is very bright, but the future is going to look very different than it does now in 20 years. And we could have said that 20 or 30 years ago, and it's come true. So, and I think for people who are thinking about it, as I've said previously, it's a very low risk way to find out if you're good at selling, if sort of this level of entrepreneurship is good for you. So you really don't have a lot to lose in terms of checking out some companies. If you're into baking, then there are companies that sell baked goods. Imagine baking on Facebook Live in front of 100 people, and then they all buy the pan that you baked in. Like you're doing what you love, but you're also able to monetize it a little bit. So
use the pan as a tax write-off.
Well, maybe, yeah. Yeah, so you've got to get that tax thing in there every time.
Yeah. I eat, sleep, and breathe it. So
it's really just, it's a fun way to find out, to get some product and to find out if this whole thing is for you. And at the end of the day, if it's not for you, then, you know, you've got some free product and go on your merry way and try out some other things. But in life, I'm always saying, you know, just always be trying things. Like, you know,
yeah,
you want to run a marathon, go run a couple of kilometers. And, you know, if you hated it, at least just try to start. But
exactly.
You know, if you want to get into sales, you know, buy a few products, see if your friends are interested, and go from there. And if you try 5 or 10 things, a couple of them will stick and become a habit.
And, you know, and I think the other thing, you touched on it earlier, is the skills you build.
Yeah.
That could take you to the next thing. Like, you know, I read something, or I heard a video yesterday that said that just in the last 12 months, 22% of small businesses closed.
Yeah.
You know, and there was another percentage that said like they're just barely surviving, and now Ontario's in a lockdown and just shut it all down and everyone's protesting. But you know what I mean? Like, entrepreneurship's hard if you have a bricks and mortar business.
Absolutely.
Right. So
yeah, and there's risk. There's you buy, if you're bricks and mortar, you're buying a lot of stock, you're employing people, you're investing a lot of time on advertising.
Yeah.
And that can all be gone in a second. God bless those people who do it, but it's a risk. That's getting back to direct selling. It's like that on a very small scale, but the company is putting up a lot of that. You know, they're putting up the website and they're developing the products and creating the tools to help you sell. So hopefully some people, if there's a silver lining out of all this, there's some people who've been in direct selling and thought it was fun, and they're like, hey, you know what, there's an empty store down the street from me, maybe I'll start my own business or something like that. So we're part of building that small business, and that's what's going to bring the economy back.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's check the comments here. Mary Jane says, my personal opinion is do something you know you love. That's one of the main keys to direct selling success. Paulo O'Donnell says, I started out as a kidnapper and joined for the personal discount 6 years ago, and now this is my full-time job.
Wow.
Elsie says, is attraction marketing the way to go with MLM companies? Avril says, most people are at home. I think that was probably talking about our current situation. So yeah. So anyways, it's like some people are getting some value here. It's been great. I appreciate you. I appreciate what you guys are doing. appreciate you taking this time. Wow, this has been fantastic to be able to sit down and have a chat and get this out there into the Facebook community. And, I'm passionate about the industry. I think it's great. I talked about it in the book. But there's lots of opportunities. People can do things from home. So, I just wanted to kind of unblur that fine line that everybody talks about, right? So, and who better to talk to than you, right? So
yeah, and this industry at times has been its own worst enemy, but I think particularly in Canada, where companies operate very high standards and we work with the government, not against them. I think it's there's never been a better time to get into this, and you're safe in doing that.
And you told me some stuff I had no idea how this industry does in Canada. Like, I always thought it was sort of U.S. Canada. I knew the NFR side of it, but being a company in Canada, I think from an independent person, it's very important. I would think that would be one of the check boxes.
Yeah.
Right. To want to make sure that your company is operating in Canada.
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of US companies, they see Canada as a first step to global expansion. So, and on the same front, we have a bunch of European companies who they want to get into North America, but they come to Canada first because, it's a bit, the regulation here is a bit more similar to Europe than the US is. So they come here first, get a footprint, and then move into the US. So yeah, Canada's it's a great place to test products as well. Like, Canadians, the whole world's in Canada, so you can really test the product and see if people want
absolutely.
it or not.
Yeah.
As you can tell, I love talking about this. So.
We could go on all afternoon.
Yeah,
me too. I get passionate about it. So anyways, I don't know if you got any final comments. I mean, I just want to say thank you. I really, really appreciate you taking the time. And I think, I think there'll be some good comments and some good value, at least coming out of this. There was for me, just in our
let's keep up the conversation. If anyone who's watching, if your company's not a DSA Canada member, then and quite a number of our members have joined because their consultants have gone to the head office and said, "Why aren't you a member of the DSA?" So just a little plug there. If your company's not a member, it's a real win-win. We support the companies, they support us, and the industry grows. So thanks for the time, and let's keep up the conversation.
Absolutely. And if there's anybody in the group that's hasn't liked the DSA Canada or the US Facebook page, please go over and like it. I'll link it in the comments here. So, follow them along. They're putting out some good content. It's nice to see what they're doing. So
yeah, awesome. Thanks, Doug.
All right. Thanks, Peter.
Thank you.
That was great. See you guys.